April 16th, by the looks of it, is when V2 actually ended up being developed. Yeah, so 16th April, and yeah, I just took a little screenshot of the very, very onset of Necromancer V2, and that was when things started happening for the current version. So this is the very, very first glimpses of what would eventually become Necromancer V3. Initially, I was kind of just getting the setting sort of going. So this is literally just a terrain mesh, I think. I forget the name of it exactly, but you could basically just paint terrain in Unity. And so I used that as a way of creating these kind of mountainous sort of areas that looked kind of not necessarily very physically accurate. Like, they don't really make that much sense. But I guess the idea is, at this point in time, you're in a world that is so different from our own that it barely makes any sense to, you know, what we're looking like at the moment. So that was the very, very beginnings of it, and not long after, one of the first things I did was trying to get movement sorted. So I've got some jumping going. So I got some basic weapons and projectiles, and you can see that the hand looked very high quality at this point. But yeah, you know, I was this was just prototyping things. So this was, you know, not long after I had learned Blender for the first time as well. In New Zealand, we had our big first lockdown when, you know, the coronavirus stuff sort of first really hit in New Zealand. Yeah, so we were basically in lockdown then, and what I decided to do was start learning Blender. I was still pretty new to it at that point, and I had done some donuts. Like, wait, let me see. Like, I probably got my first Blender donut. I don't think I went all the way to the end of the Blender tutorials. I got mostly what I wanted out of it, and then decided to start doing some other stuff. Them fried zucchini though, oh yeah, for sure. So where I gotta find, I just need to find this now. I don't know why, but I gotta find my Blender donuts. It's not in the place that I thought it would be. Just a couple more seconds. I really gotta find this. I don't know why. Ah, here it is. Haha, I did find it. So yeah, check it out. So this is my Blender donuts from way back in the day. I think it turned out pretty well. I think that looks pretty tasty. So I did get the coffee cup going, at least. Some nice donuts. What's the date stamps on these? So I finished that 27th of April. If that's 27th of April, then that means that this and the sort of 3D modeling that I was doing at this stage are not even at the point that I'd finished the Blender tutorial, so I was only just starting to get used to it. Yeah, so that's why the shape of it is pretty potato. But yeah, you know, I was still learning. All these good things take a little bit more practice, which I ended up definitely getting a lot of. Got some really basic weapons and projectiles, and then we got to this point, and yeah, so now we've got some really basic enemies. Hadn't gotten collision sorted yet. Yeah, so we just had like really basic projectiles and yeah, like you can sort of see the landscape of Necromancer started sort of becoming reasonably apparent. And yeah, a lot of the same shape that, you know, you can see the terrain took at that point. That's still in V3 at this point. Oh, look at that. Crispy fried zucchini with best dipping sauce. Oh man. Oh, look at that. No. Alright, well, so what's next? Okay, so now we've got spawn points, enemy damage. That zucchini flip is pretty pro, not gonna lie. We've got spawn points, enemy damage, and highlighting project... so highlighting, I think, means when they take damage and stuff. Projectile collision, and death! It is quite a trip going back through what this game used to look like, because I mean, some of the core gameplay elements are still there, but it's so utterly different to what it is now. So many bubbles. Look at all these very calm looking bubbles just filling the screen. God, I forgot how many projectiles I used to have on the screen. Absolutely crazy. It used to just be like kind of a giant mess. But yeah, but that was before the days of me actually doing any performance improvements and that kind of thing. But yeah, okay, so where were we at for that? So that was 19th April 2020. So that was only after about 3 days of development. And yeah, for anyone who doesn't know my host body in real life, when I get into something like this, I get super obsessive about it. And I think especially during the April lockdown, this is basically what I decided to do in my spare time pretty much constantly. So I was just just going for it. Like basically from the beginning of the day to the night, and you know, like as up to the point that I was sleeping, I was just absolutely going crazy with development. And then 20th April, so did some work in varying sound pitch so things sounded less repetitive. Excuse me, had to burp. Made the enemy projectiles a bit faster, added a bit more terrain, and more importantly, laid the framework for spawns to occur at specific listed intervals. So I actually made a kind of spawn set at that point. Also begun work on the currency system. Currently, kills allow you to spend money on heals, which is the purple hand, because yeah, I was at this point really trying to do this no UI kind of deal. So I was trying to show what you could do, or what spells you had available with like the color of your hand. In time, they'll also be used for resurrections and upgrades, and got some Attack on Titan music going on. I still kind of want to get the franticness of Attack on Titan music going, to get in some tracks or some parts of the music in the final release or something. So yeah, so when that hand turns purple, that means that I've taken some damage and I can heal up now. Projectiles are so slow and they trailed behind so much. The tooth as well was super low poly. And I was starting to get a little bit of terrain, and I thought that, you know, rather than just having this flat plane, I would have a little bit of terrain to, you know, actually mean that you have to sort of like jump around a little bit more and sort of have a bit more awareness about where you're stepping, as opposed to just sort of, you know, everything is on a flat plane. There's a little bit of a lull. One of the later videos is when I sort of started getting into the, it's not just an easy sort of route, and it sort of gets a bit more frantic. It really wants me to watch that video on zucchinis. So lots of changes. Looks like the it looks like this party's getting crazy. Too many new features to list, but the core concept is every kill nets you a type of XP, which can be spent on your resurrective ability. Your resurrective ability is prioritized according to 1 heals, 2 summons, 3 upgrades, and new weapons respectively. If you have less than full health, the difference will be spent as a full heal. If you have enough to afford summons, you can do that. If you have full health and summons, the rest can be cashed into upgrades when enough upgrade money is banked, and upgrade a new weapon spawns. So failure to get good and keep your buddies alive means your upgrades will take longer. And there's a new enemy type, which is the Shambler, and 2 new weapons, which is the Shotgun and the Crucifier. The Shotgun and the Crucifier were one of the first things that I made, because I really wanted a shotgun and I really wanted a railgun. So those were very, very important on the priority list. So this was, I guess, the beginning of my first idea about how to do heals and resurrections and that kind of thing. Because what I wanted was something that kept the system quote-unquote simple, and kind of meant that you didn't have to think very hard about it, and didn't have to do too much frantic key dancing and micromanagement on your keyboard, let's say. What I wanted was a sort of intuitive system that kind of handles it all for you. But what that ended up meaning is that it kind of ended up being reasonably unintuitive, because it was really difficult for people to figure out that priority and actually learn how that worked. So that ended up definitely being axed and properly split up into separate keys for heals and summons and upgrades and that kind of thing. Initially, they were all in one key. The logic of the game itself sort of handled it, which was less than ideal. So yeah, you know, part of the learning experience. That's what it looks like when I drink water. So you can see that the hand kind of changes color, and the sort of altar or ring in the middle has the same color as the hand to sort of visually show you what stuff you have available. I can't even tell what the colors mean at this point, because I think I wasn't able to get them looking too distinct. And yeah, so the same sort of deal as what's in the current iteration, where you've got the altar and you can pick up the new weapons and upgrades from the altar. I wasn't sure how to do shotgun pellets and that kind of thing, so it's got a whole collection of what looks like the shotgun pellets, but they're actually just one game object that just is basically one projectile. Back then, I really wanted to get the sort of low-res, you know, heavily pixelated vibe, which I would still maybe like to do as sort of an optional parameter in your menu options. Oh god, look at that. Such a mess. Just all of the enemies kind of just like stacking on top of each other. But that was why you get the Crucifier, because this is just a railgun that just goes through everything. And I think it did a lot of damage back then. So I do kind of want to have that pixelated effect still, but the reason why I don't have it at the moment is because I eventually changed rendering pipelines from the built-in render pipeline of Unity to the universal render pipeline. When I did that, the script that I found that was making the pixelated effect happen stopped working, so that was less than ideal. The way that the game ended up becoming, it ended up being just not very compatible with that pixelated effect. The game itself and the size of the arena started becoming bigger, and that meant that you ended up wanting to snipe things a little bit more. And yeah, having the pixelated stuff happening where you couldn't actually see what you were trying to snipe just didn't really work out too well. So yeah, so I ended up kind of axing that. But yeah, I don't know, maybe that'll end up being brought back. Probably would have a parameter or something that shows the rendering resolution. To be honest, that's not a high priority at this stage because I'm more interested in getting the enemies and balance a little bit more streamlined and more fun, implementing some more lore stuff and stuff like that. So now we're up to the 24th of April. I was blasting the Doom Eternal soundtrack quite a lot. Very much enjoyed that game, and that was also a huge inspiration for some of the vibe of this game. Yeah, so the summoning stuff is there. I kind of ever so slightly improved the hand, but I was still pretty bad at modeling at that stage, so the hand's still not ideal. But you could kind of see the core gameplay loop starting to show through a little bit more. And yeah, so now that we've got multiple weapons, we've got the weapon swapping element coming in a little bit more. I can't even remember how I got the enemies to sort of space each other out a little bit more. I think that kind of just happened mostly by chance. In the current iteration, I started using voids a lot more, so that kind of happens a little bit more properly, algorithmically. So that was what it was looking like after basically just over a week of development. So not too long to actually start getting a little bit of the core gameplay stuff going. And then what have we got here? So 26th April, 10 days after, we've got shotgun and weapon swapping improvements, new UI, quote unquote, because yeah, at this stage I was still trying to do HUD-less, but you still have visual things in the arena to sort of tell you what's going on in the game. Oh yeah, and I started actually adding Necromancers at this point. Yeah, so there's the first Necromancer enemies. Oh wow, they had way more health than I remember. So when I'm talking about a UI, what I mean, so over here, this is the UI that we were talking about. The only things that it's really showing at the moment are, I think, how many souls you've got available and what the weapon number is of the weapon that just spawned. And that's still there in Necromancer version 3. I like the idea of being able to play the game HUD-less and still be able to actually play it and not just have to remember everything, especially when, you know, there's a little bit of sort of money management and that kind of thing that you have to do. Been a while, so lots of changes, including things such as adding Elite Revenants, which one-shot you. I forgot that they used to do that. And now the primary summons of Necromancers, Lacerators, which charge fanatically at you and explode on contact, and an in-game loop for infinite play. And new weapons added, which are the Lathian Snubnose and the Reaver. Honestly, I'm surprised I managed to stay alive for the whole video, considering how many things now one-shot you. So for anyone who has played the current iteration of the game, we can now see the onset of the green guys. So we're now up to 4th May, just under a month of development, day 19. Even back then, there's been a lot of sort of visual changes to the whole environment and things sort of like tonally. I've always had to be workshopping the visuals because it's been something that's been messing me and doing my head in ever since the beginning. So that's always been a work in progress. The gameplay is starting to be a lot more frantic, but you've got your summons so they can help out with the pulling aggro and that kind of thing. And yeah, there we go. There's the onset of the Snubnose, which is another one of the core weapons in the current iteration. I really need to make the being hurt and sort of death screens a little bit more impressive. Hold up a sec. I'm going to just BRB very quickly while you guys watch this because I need to turn off my heater because it's getting very hot in this room. God, I hate Facebook's interface. It's so... Zucchini! Be gone. Yeah, so I guess the only thing to comment on is the Reaver. So the Reaver kind of still had more or less the functionality that it did back then and has now. It was always a sort of charge up for a very powerful blast, but back in the day, it didn't have a weak version that fired while it was charging. So eventually, it became both the weak version that charges up into the powerful, strong version. But yeah, so I guess that was really the main stuff. Then yeah, I started taking some photos. I did a proper render of the Necromancer in Blender. So this is what he looked like at that point, which is, I think, still the exact same model even to this day. visual changes, basic animations, and an ammo mechanic which refills when you are swapping to another weapon. So yep, that's in the current iteration as well. Yeah, so we've got the spawn points, we've got some particle effects to show that they're active. It looks like this is also the point where I added the instruction tombstone. So this over here is the instruction tombstone, which I wanted to have like a sort of little thing in-game that tells you the mechanics and tells you how to play the game. And I I was trying to write a little bit of lore into it and that kind of thing as well, which I think kind of meant that people wouldn't really read it, and it was kind of just excessively verbose and that kind of thing. Oh, so that was 7th May, then 13th May, things started getting a little bit more interesting in terms of the level design. God, this track is such a banger. So I started getting a little bit more verticality to the levels, which I don't actually have in the current iteration, because that was in V2, but it wasn't in V3. And I kind of want to bring it back into V3, but yeah, just haven't gotten the chance to do so yet, or I want to think of a way to do it properly. And yeah, you can see that the Lich has made its first appearance as well. We got the launch pads, which was very iconic from V2. Because, yeah, those launch pads were everywhere, and they were used constantly. You can see that things get very hectic with the lacerators and that kind of thing, which back then weren't really green guys so much as very scary carrots. But yeah, so anyway, so that's probably the main stuff that's worth looking at in that version. So now, we had finally gotten a demo out, I think. But yeah, so this is when it was actually playable as a demo, and I could actually start sending it to people and getting people to try it out and see how it goes. It looks like I also actually created a music track for this, so that might even be the current arena theme. So this was sort of like a little bit of a full rendition from the start to the finish. So yeah, so here is the, I guess, the first menu screen. And we've got a little bit of options and parameters that we can tweak. Oh god, I wish I could tweak the quality on this YouTube video or Facebook video. And so at this point, I was trying to sort of make the instructions apparent through these instruction tombstones, but which I like the idea of them, but yeah, but you know, realistically, they're probably a little bit too cryptic. So yeah, there we go. We've got the beginnings of the first arena track. I cannot even read that. Okay, maybe we need to not look at the Facebook version for this, because dear lord, the quality of this is so bad. So 9th of June, where are we at with that? Can we actually read what this is saying this time? We got the instruction tombstones. I think also, especially with the pixelation and everything, it was super hard to read. But yeah, all part of the process. Little things that need to be workshopped. And then we also had the whole thing of when you want to start the game, you step into the middle. Oh yeah, so kill enemies to get necromantic energy, in brackets, Detrozide. So that's a little tidbit of lore that's kind of, I guess, less advertised now. So the the idea is that necromantic energy is actually an element on the periodic table, and it's called Detrozide. So that's I guess like the very in-house lore name for it. I don't know, it perhaps seems like a little bit counterintuitive to how I actually want the lore to be interpreted, maybe. But yeah, I don't know, it's a neat little detail for anyone who's in the know. And yeah, so we've got the sort of upgrade system and everything going. You've got a time and a Detrozide counter at the top to show. So yeah, so Detrozide I eventually ended up just renaming to be souls. Oh yeah, and then we've got the annihilation buff, but no slowdown or sort of dramatic power-up effect transition kind of thing. But yeah, but we had the same, yeah, like some of the same sound effects to show that you've got this sort of quad damage thing going on now. So yeah, so this is 140 something seconds in, and I think later on start getting liches and that kind of thing, and they are massive tanks. So that hasn't really changed too much. And I think this is the onset of the flashing light syndrome that NV2 had quite a lot of, unfortunately. Because I was trying to make the new upgrades more apparent. So, you know, if you've got an upgrade now, then I wanted to make it apparent that you can pick this up now. Having flashing lights and that kind of thing is probably not the best way to go about it. So yeah, on that note, I should probably caution Anyone who's going to continue watching this to probably just be careful if you have epilepsy or any sort of like sensitivity to that kind of thing, because yeah, there's a few flashing lights and stuff in these next few iterations. Yeah, but later on, and especially in NV3, that ends up being less of a thing. Alright, so, where do we go from there? So changes to weapons, including actual hands to hold them with, visual changes to the lacerator to make them a lot easier to see, considering that they are one of the biggest threats to the player. Got some good old death grips playing in the background. I think this is just a short video just to show the current look of things. I don't think I did that much gameplay with this video. So, yeah, they were a massive problem back then. Possibly a lot more threatening than they are at this stage. And yeah, like, they had these massive trails and everything so you could see them as well. Let's see, so that was 15th of June. 20th of June added a lot of new animations, most notably for spellcasting, but also the shotgun. Also added the Gauntlets of the Wraith, another heretic callback for the OGs out there. So this is day 65, 2 months in. And as usual, gauntlets were a little bit of a secret weapon that that you had to find hiding around the arena somewhere. I think probably even back then they had the mechanic of giving you double souls, like they do in NV3. I think, yeah, maybe at this point is when I start sort of not doing videos as frequently. Yeah, so I think I sort of start doing a little bit less regular updates at this point. I ended up kind of trying to do my updates a little bit more meaningfully, I guess, because I think in the early days, I was kind of just doing a regular devlog kind of deal, but I think eventually I started wanting to just focus on just actually developing it a little bit more. That's something that I've always sort of struggled with, just, you know, in terms of being able to balance the development stuff versus actually telling people about it and talking about the game and that kind of thing. So this looks like this is a bit of a while after the last update. This ends up going on YouTube. This is a full sort of playthrough demo of the different stuff that was going on in there. But let me just see if I can get the main ideas. So menu screen not looking too different. We've got the skybox looking a lot more like what it looks like now. But I think at this point I still had each one of those skybox elements being actual physical objects inside of the world. Oh no, I think this is at the point where I actually turned them into the skybox. I've completely forgotten when I actually did that. I might have missed that, and that actually happened a few videos ago. But yeah, but I think we're at the point now where the skybox is actually a skybox, as opposed to each one of those skulls and things being physical game objects inside of the game world. So yeah, so now a lot more things I think are starting to look like a little bit closer to the current iteration. So I was still trying to do the HUDless kind of thing where, you know, I was trying to show the things that you could do on the screen, but not actually have a HUD thing on. So this sort of little sprite that you see floating about in the middle, that was supposed to be a thing to show you've got some souls available and you can do something with those. So it's green at the moment to show that I can heal. Because remember, this is still back when I had a sort of spell priority. So I have to heal first, then if I'm at full health and I've summoned, then I can bank for upgrades. So anytime I take damage, I have to heal first before I can do anything else. And then, yeah, you know, a little bit of bits of tutorial stuff. I can't remember when I sort of made the tutorials a little bit more optional. I think I still need to figure out some way to make the tutorial something that's a little bit more apparent so people don't just kind of ignore it. Because yeah, this game does require at least a little bit of familiarization before you know how the game works. You can kind of dive into it, but I think you very quickly realize that there's a few more mechanics that if you don't know what those mechanics are, then you're not exactly getting the core gameplay loop correct. How to communicate that is always a little bit tricky. That is perhaps one of the main struggles or things that I need to try and work on and get better at. As a game developer, communicating my intentions of what and how I want the game to be played to the players playing the game. Yeah, that's always something that I think is very, very important, obviously, and really worth doing, but it's just always been quite tricky to do in practice. Ooh, and we've even got dreadnoughts coming up. So it looks like I've built those into the game at this point. Oh yeah, so the scythe upgrade that shows up in the full version of NV3 when that eventually comes out. When do we start getting dreadnoughts? So the dreadnoughts were basically very, very big juggernauts and just absolute fat tanks that just soak up ridiculous amounts of damage. Like, I like the design of them, but yeah, in terms of like how that works with the gameplay, that's a pretty boring progression of how exactly the game is supposed to work, or, you know, like what the enemies do to challenge you. Yeah, we've got the Void Cannon and Devourer actually showing up here. So yeah, they're a thing now. And you can see all those blue trails everywhere is from the Devourers just eating everything. So that looked kind of cool, but unfortunately that tanked performance quite a bit. And you can see some strange sort of particles and articles there. Ah, yeah, so I had the tutorials sort of enabled by default, but then eventually I sort of made it so that they could be disabled, and once you'd done a playthrough, if you knew how to play the game, then you could sort of turn them off. So yeah, so 12th August. So how does time work? So yeah, so that's, I guess, roughly 4 months into development. Yeah, so that's, you know, we're getting there. Then I actually started setting up a Steam page.